Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we try to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Orvins, and on today's episode, I'm super pumped about this one because we're going to dive into the topic of building a revenue engine with some additional points. So pause on that for now. Today's podcast is sponsored by the great team at Virtual Causeway. Traditional demand gen is breaking for a lot of teams we talk to on the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. Virtual Causeway helps to fix that by shifting away from demand generation to demand positioning. Instead of chasing form fills, they engineer where and how your brand appears when buyers research through AI tools and peer networks. The result? Fewer cold motions, more high intent conversations, and revenue teams actually spending time with people who want to buy. Check them out at virtualcauseway.com. And don't forget to mention the show for a special rate. So my guest today is the founder and CEO of Maropost, Ross Paquette.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so Ross has built and scaled a global SaaS business by solving some of the hardest revenue problems in modern commerce, turning fragmented customers' data into real, repeatable revenue. Now, he's built a unified commerce and marketing platform that's powering thousands of brands around the world. He's spent more than a decade building Maropost from the ground up, navigating product pivots, scaling globally, and leading through multiple market shifts, all the while staying deeply focused on how technology actually drives growth for operators, not just marketers. He brings a rare combination of founder grit, long-term thinking, and operator-level clarity on what sustainable revenue actually looks like. Ross, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
So to kick us off, can you share with us a little bit about your world? What industries or verticals do you work in? What are the selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
Yeah, for sure. So we have quite a diverse or broad product spectrum. I would say versus 90 or frankly 95% of the SaaS market. So we actually have 7 different products in one platform, as well as 2 acquisitions. So we have our core platform, which is Maropost, of course, is e-commerce, retail, marketing automation, help desk, and search and merchandising, which is really an offshoot kind of function off of the e-commerce side of things. And then we also have CDP, which is just naturally our reporting analytics, single customer view, data center, as you were describing earlier. And then, of course, our DaVinci AI side of things, which both powers the platform in similar ways you've seen in the market, but also it tells the user a lot of the things that they should do or should be thinking about or should be looking at, as opposed to just being more reactive responses. So that's the core. And then we've got 2 acquisitions out of Australia, also in the e-com and retail space as well. So quite a broad selection of products on that front.
So if you're in e-commerce and you're looking to grow, just call Maropost. They've got everything you need.
Yeah, that is really the main focus. Effectively, I mean, given a large portion of your listeners are in the B2B SaaS space or revenue space, we're effectively the HubSpot for B2C. So one solution that you can really expand, grow, and scale with, as opposed to, arguably the Shopify model, which is, you buy Shopify and then you buy 50 different plugins, best case scenario, frankly, and then you really have to build from there, but really doesn't create an outcome that is centered around the business, I guess you could say, from the Shopify side. So for Maropost, you're really operating from a command center, much like how we want to operate our own business from a growth perspective as well.
Oh, I like that. HubSpot for B2C. There you go. See, learning stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So how we got to the topic today is I asked Ross, I said, I ask everybody, what's a successful revenue initiative you've ever led or an existing challenge that you're either solving or have solved? And he quickly said, it has to be how I built a revenue engine when you're bootstrapped or self-funded and you can't just hire a VP of sales and hope for the best. So this is one where I'm pretty excited to talk about. So maybe to kick us off, what did you Ross, what did you personally have to own as the founder much longer than you actually wanted to without hiring a VP of sales?
Yeah. So wait, when you're asking that question, do you mean in regards to sales or you just mean in general?
Yeah, I think it's just in general because when we kind of did a bit of the prep, you said it was like a revenue system, but VP of sales. So I think it seems like more of all of revenue. If we take marketing out, but like the revenue generation side, it seems like that's the topic.
Yeah. It's and really when you're saying that, I mean, when I said in general, frankly, I was even thinking outside of marketing or outside of revenue, outside of marketing, because frankly, if you're really building a bootstrap business, you have to do everything from day one. I'm not a programmer, so I'm not, I wasn't coding or writing any of the application. But frankly, or thankfully, I should say, I came from a background where I was in sales. I was great at the administrative side of things, great at doing demos in particular, not particularly great probably at sales. I mean, I don't want to comment on my own growth side there. But I would say that was the most important thing that happened to me was I had to be the marketer. I had to be the VP of sales. I had to be the VP of partnerships. I had to be the VP of HR all the way down the line, with the exception of again, the technology side that my co-founder handled, VP of product as well. And so where we were really successful, and obviously we can dive more into just specific revenue aspects, was I just listened to the customers, fed that, kind of decision making or functionality decisions that we needed at the time. Again, this is like 13 years ago or 10 years ago plus. And that really created that very symbiotic relationship between what our customers really wanted and effectively the platform that we had. And we'll step back obviously to the revenue side specifically, but that's really what drove us from about 300,000 of revenue to about 26 million in about 28 months back in, what was that, 2015 or so.
Okay. That whole journey, were you doing founder-led sales the entire time?
During that period, yeah. Which was a pro and con, which is going to relate to, I think, your core question of the day.
Yeah. So the founder-led sales, something I've had the fortunate ability to be part. I'm not saying I'm the founder, but a friend of mine, David Bloom, started a company called Learniture, which we rebranded to Level Jump Software, which was acquired by Salesforce. But I joined him, and it was just the three of us. It was him, myself, and the CTO at the time.
Sounds familiar. Yeah.
Okay. So, and that was a point where, look, we were just trying to solve it. And for him, he was constantly involved in conversations. We're not saying I couldn't handle it. He was like, look, I just want to be able to know, because then I can roadmap for the future. Yeah. And so maybe a question there is, when you had to do all of that, when you brought in those conversations, were you bringing it from the founder mentality of what are customers actually saying that I can solve? Or were you bringing it like, look, I just need to close this deal and get the revenue in the door, and then we'll figure it out later? Is there a connection, or is there a separation?
It was probably a bit of both, actually. I would say that, it was definitely a bit of both, because you'd be on calls with customers and understanding, again, like features or functions that even they're thinking about that, again, circa 10 years ago or more, that they just simply didn't have. And the ability to transition what you're hearing on a call, say doing a discovery or just quickly walking through the, a needs analysis, and then transitioning that into like a simple product spec, as I was kind of describing before. That's that founder aspect that's building that, right? If I was just the VP of, maybe not VP of sales, right? Wrong way of looking at it. But if I was just trying to sell and close that piece of business, right? I would just be going through the demo as quick as possible based on what their needs are. But I wouldn't be relaying that second layer back to the product team and be like, guys, we really need to add features 1, 2, 3, because I'm hearing this across the spectrum. And that really was a huge aspect of that explosive growth that we saw from, again, 326 million. Just listening from the founder aspect,
which is great. Emmerich Arnault, who's the CEO of Agorapulse, he's also built a bootstrap business. That was one of the things he talked about. He bootstrapped Agorapulse, but he talked a lot about like being on those calls and listening so intently to the people and being like, oh, this is such a challenge, I can't solve it. And if he was thinking from the sales, and I don't want to speak on his behalf. So Emmerich, when you listen to this, I'm not speaking on your behalf, but I'm trying to get into the mentality of you. He became so obsessed with trying to solve that problem because it's something that exists across the organization versus just closing the customer. And so he was solving for a solution versus closing the customer. Yeah. Is that a hard distinction to make early on when you're trying to just continue to grow versus?
I think it shouldn't be. No, I mean, if you're focused on the customer, I mean, that's going to come to mind first and foremost. And again, if you're hearing sort of recurring themes from your prospective customers or from your current customers, it's really not that hard to aggregate it together. And again, it depends on the size of business we're talking about, right? If we're in those early stages, I mean, that's all on you. And I think this is the big differentiation, as we were discussing before the call started, around the bootstrap versus funded directions that people can go in, right? If you're on the Bootstrap side, you don't really have a choice but to do what you were describing or what I'm describing as well. If you're on the funded side, you start hiring people and you become further away from those conversations.
Okay, so if we take it back to those moments where you're in that like explosive growth, and there is something to say to be like, hey, look, we'll have the founder on this call.
Yeah, I still talk about that.
Do you?
Oh yeah, it's super important. Like now, I don't mean to interrupt here, but now we're in the stage where, of course, we have sales teams all over the world. And I've really been trying, I would say, over the last 5 years to move from the more like startup dictatorship style approach that's needed, let's call it maybe wartime, peacetime view, to the more supportive peacetime, founder, CEO, what have you, meaning that I want the team telling me what they want me on, right? Do you need me on a call? Do you need me to talk to a partner? Do you need me to go to an event? Do you need me to just stand there and say nothing? Like that can arguably be a thing. And that relates back to the comment you mentioned, because we've been interviewing, as we were discussing, for a number of revenue roles. And the number one thing I bring up is like, I want you to tell me if you just need me to sit there on a call, say hello, and be friendly to a customer. Like that's great. Better than not doing it. And then the deal maybe takes a little bit longer, or the partnership takes a little bit longer, or the strategy takes a little bit longer to implement. I think that is ultimately a core, I could say value or skill that we bring to the table just based on our title alone, or experience, I should say, maybe not title.
I completely agree with you. There's times where I've had some of the managers be like, hey, I just need you to sit here. I just need your title. Like, I just need your title to enter the room. And I'm like, look, it doesn't, but it's also hard. I don't know if you found it hard, because I'm going to ask sort of a two-part question. I know I shouldn't, but it's related. Okay. Did you find it a challenge to go, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just here as a smiling face. You got the founder. I'm listening. I'm doing all this stuff, versus like, all right, can I tell you how to solve this? Because you get so excited.
No, I start messaging in the background when that happens, if I have a problem. So that pisses people off in a different way. But I definitely would not do it on the call, unless it was like an extreme scenario where somebody is going so far off the wrong path. But
it's fun, because there's times where you're like, okay, can I look, I've seen this before. Can I just jump in for a second? Like,
take over.
That's the challenge. So there's a bit of a question I think you've talked about, and I think it's really good, because the wartime, peacetime, love the concept.
Yeah.
For you, or even like for your experience, maybe share a little, if you can share, what was your journey as a leader to move from that startup CEO to a scale-up CEO? How did you translate that?
Translate or transition? Or
both.
I think it's what I said a moment ago. I mean, it's moving from, again, that dictator style approach. Like, ultimately, yes, I still have to make decisions. They're obviously far more organized than they were back in the day. But I think it's moving into that supportive role. What do you guys need from me? Right. So when you've been talking a lot about having a VP of sales in particular, but when you have a VP of department XYZ, it gets to a stage where it's like, you can't do everything, obviously. And number two, those people will work very, very well to bring to you only the scenarios, tasks, whatever projects or so on, that they really, really need you involved in. As in, it's not creating some email thread or a process for a customer to create their web store or implement their POS system or so on. Like that, now I would say after such a long period of time, we really have a strong team to do that. But it's taken a lot of years, and frankly, I think it's the same with everybody else, especially if they're bootstrapped, to get to that stage.
Yeah,
with the team it is.
I've heard it from many that I've talked to, but even experiencing it is that journey, but witnessing other leaders go through that phase. I'm sure you've talked to other CEOs of like, because this is how the world works, right? Like you get, hey, can you share with me a little bit of your experience? What do you tell those founders in their journey? Say, hey, by the way, prepare for these things when you go from startup to scale up.
In terms of the prepare for, it comes down to trust, I would say, obviously, and that's not usually something that comes naturally, especially in the bootstrapped environment, right? Because you're in a much more, I shouldn't say we were not in a challenging position, but and the other founders that I know, or most closely, were also not in such challenging environments. But I think the organizations out there that frankly I just don't, haven't spoken to, haven't met, haven't heard about. I think they likely are in that area where like profit margin is maybe 5 to 10% if they're bootstrapped, because they have to have something. So there's not a lot of leeway to make mistakes. And so coming back to the comment around trust, it just takes us a little bit longer when you're in that bootstrapped environment to really, become comfortable with somebody being super effective in I would say the most difficult area is the revenue side of things, probably revenue and marketing, or sales and marketing. Because again, like it's literally, it's week over week, right? It's not like a product situation where it's like somebody can take 5 months or 6 months to get something out the door, whether it's features or products or a new area of the platform. If we're having bad weeks in terms of revenue side, or bad weeks in terms from a marketing productivity standpoint or lead gen perspective, you really want to, make decisions quickly. And so making sure that you have a high level of confidence in your team, or frankly, just having a high level of confidence in your team, is the most important aspect. So again, coming back to that trust piece I was mentioning before.
Yeah, and I know we talked about this initially with the VP of sales, but it seems like the conversation should actually be around the entire revenue team versus just sales. And what you were just talking about, like, how do you make decisions quickly? So before you join, and maybe you can go back to your journey of like the challenge that you're facing before you brought in that VP of marketing, VP of sales. I'm just going to use generic titles, VP of RevOps to really VP of customer success. Before you brought those senior leaders in to report to you, how did you establish the system that you knew, okay, this is our baseline, this is how we're operating, I need somebody now to come in and take it to the next level? Did you have a system? Did you build it, or did you wait to sort of bring that person into compliance?
To be honest with you, we had a number of like failed starts in this area, 2 in particular, one that cost about 3 million and the other one that cost about 5 million. The first one in Toronto, the second one in Chicago. And, we have, like, I say I, Maropost, have had like a very tumultuous journey from selling part of the business in an all secondary round to buying that back to making these acquisitions we've talked about. And so why I reference that is when we were going through those 2 stages that I mentioned, it was after I'd sold part of the business. It really just became hey, this seems like a great idea. If we hire 20 sales reps, it could be great, and bring on a VP of sales. They hire a bunch of people and go from there. But I don't think that there was anything strategy or structure wise that actually, and I shouldn't say that. The second instance, without naming anybody, they really had a strong level of experience because a number of them had actually come from Salesforce. And while there's a lot of failures that startups see when they hire from those larger organizations, it's funny, this came up earlier today on a separate call. I think they actually could have been successful if we weren't going through this sort of tumultuous period with our partners at the time, again, that we ended up buying out, because they did put together a very clear plan in particular that we had never had before, simply around the conversion. I'm simplifying it here, but the conversion from raw leads all the way to closed one. And there was like 20 different stages. And I'm not saying this is like the end all and be all, but for us, that was like the first time we had actually tracked it in that manner. So on a week over week basis, you could see like what's fluctuating, where are we losing people from an MQL to SQL perspective, or where is somebody falling off from discovery to demo or so on, and really pinpointing just what was successful or frankly what wasn't, being the more important aspect. And I would say that this was in 2018, by the way. I would say that for the subsequent years after that, we really didn't have that same structure in place, because it went back to this very scrappy, gritty, bootstrap style approach of let's call it Ross and Co., which is something I've tried to do. Yeah, because that's how it was at the start. The company was really structured around myself. But anyway, we'll come back to that.
The Ross and Co. It's funny. Is it anyways? Because so what happened in those journeys? Is that when you said, "Hey, look, we're just going to go fast. Yeah. We have something. We're going to go fast. Toronto, Chicago. We're just going to pick 2 hubs. We're going to put more people at it, and we're just going to solve it and go." Is that what you're trying to do there?
That was what we were trying to do. We were really struggling in Toronto at the time. Again, that's the second time. Toronto, we again, made this investment, built out a team, and really not very much change from a revenue growth perspective, or even frankly a customer acquisition perspective. And so Chicago was just our second endeavor, thinking that we would get more of that sort of Midwestern grit out of the US. But yeah, as I said, there was a number of challenges going on at the time within the company, and it just sort of derailed a lot of that.
Mm.
Like we've been around for 13 years, but frankly, when I think of it, we're probably like a 6-year-old company. Like there was so many stages where years went by and like nothing happened. Again, all kind of post this sort of investor period, I guess you could say. Again, and I don't fault them. It was really just I think different alignment around values and philosophies and so on.
Well, and it makes sense. If you had a start, you did a sale, and then you kind of separated, and you came back, you bought it. So it seems like you've had, I don't know, is it Maropost 4.0 at this point, or version 4?
Honestly, basically, yeah.
Interesting.
There's a couple more of those. Yeah, definitely. It's probably 4 or 5 to be exact.
It just keeps getting better every single version.
Like some are messy. Like 4 was really messy as an example. That would have been like, maybe let's call it not 2026, but like early 25 in the 2 or 3 years prior. Then you've got like 2016 to 2019 was when we had. So it's that's very accurate, actually.
Oh.
I might actually take that down as a follow-up.
There you go. You can tell the journey of versions. But,
seriously. Yeah.
So I think the question that I'd like to kind of dig in a little more of, like, before you bring on these leaders, because it's like you said, like founder-led sales gets you to a certain point and you can do so much. But having that system before you go, okay, look, I have a framework or I have a foundation in place. Some people use EOS as an example of like, hey, here's how we're going to build it. Did you define a system or a structure where you're like, look, this is how we're going to operate? Again, it could be EOS, it could be any system you have out there, and that's going to be our cadence, no?
To be honest, no.
Oh.
And that's probably part of the reason why, again, in that early stage, let's call that version 1 and part of version 2, as you were describing, that moving from, as I called it, sort of Ross and Co. into like an actual business that was driven by more than 1 or 2 or 3 people was very, very challenging. In that, when we got, I figured, actually, to be honest, on a personal level, I figured out what my ceiling was. My ceiling was 30 million. Once we got to 30 million, it wouldn't matter not what I did, but like what I did from a revenue perspective, whether I sold another customer, whether we upgraded somebody, whatever it might have been, we would lose another customer in another way. It was like clockwork. I mean, it went on for maybe 6 months. We'd add a customer, lose it, not 1, but like add 5, lose 2, add 4 more, lose 7. And we were right in this range. Whereas before I was going like literally like this. It was like 400% growth, in those 2 years prior to that stage. And so I would say that was the point where, as I mentioned, we hired some good VPs, but then there was these other challenges that the business, kind of ran into. So we never got to a stage where that ever really, not that it didn't come to fruition, but it came to fruition and then it died, shortly thereafter.
The 30 million is an interesting one because I've heard it many times. Hey, can you? There are some people that are like, look, under 10 million, I'm great. I'm that, like, I'm going to break all the rules. I'm going to figure it out. I'll get to 10. I'm that guy. Then there's some people are like, look, I'm really good between 10 and 50. Like I'm that, like I can put a structure to prepare you. Once I get to 50 million, like,
that's a different story. And I 100% agree with for again, just my experience, right? I think everybody has, like you said, their different tiers of challenge, right? Like could be 0 to 1 million. I mean, I talked to a lot of people who are like, just getting to that first million was the hardest. For us, that part was seemingly very easy. The area above 50 million to me is by far the most difficult because again, you need other people and extremely experienced people, and experienced in a range that frankly does not have a lot of experienced people. Like you've got all the enterprise and you've got a bunch of sub 20 million, let's call it, like a huge percentage. And that gap, that 50 to, let's call it like 50 to 200 or 50 to 150 million. There's like very few people that actually sit in there. And the people who usually built the companies through those stages are where they grew so quickly through that, because of frankly, maybe just product market fit. Frankly, maybe they had amazing, kind of technology that was just coming out for the first time, right? A lot of these conversations could be said around the AI side and what we're seeing now, companies going from 0 to 200 in like 7 months.
Yeah.
That's crazy, but you get my point. So yeah, it's very interesting. I would say this is the hardest stage, and which we're right in right now.
What's the transition from your, maybe, and I don't mean to ask you a direct question, but it's more of curiosity from your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Is the phase from 20 to call it 40,
mm-hmm.
is that evolution systems? Is it process? Is it people? What is the shift that you're seeing that's, hey, look, we've brought in a great foundation or a great system? Sorry?
People and systems.
People and systems. Which one do you start with?
People.
Okay.
Because again, if you're expecting, like kind of what I was describing before, right? Like it's just, I don't know what I don't know. And so if I'm the responsible party for the revenue growth of the business, let's call it up to 30, as we were just describing. And now it's like, we're trying to go beyond that. It doesn't matter how much reading I do. I'm really going to have a hard time, building the system that goes beyond that, because I haven't built it before, number one. I would say that this is also sort of the difference between bootstrapped and funded opportunities. And it's ironic. I was on a call just earlier today, again, talking about this, where some friends of mine, like their businesses are significantly more mature than ours, but they've got 10 investors and they own like 5 or 10% of the company, as an example. So there's a trade-off in terms of that value. Either you're bootstrapped and you spend all your time focused on customers, right? Because if you start spending all of your time learning, well, who's dealing with the customers?
Right.
And if you've, gone the funded route, then, well, you've traded 90% of your company for that assisted maturity, right? Because you'll have Insight and Summit and so on showing up with a playbook that they've seen successful at, 50 other companies or 500 other companies prior to you. And that can be extremely helpful. Like I gain that value now from some of our advisory board members in particular. They show me, as you said, a certain like system, let's call it, or certain levels of reporting or analytics and so on that I'm staring at. And I'm like, this seems insane. And they're like, we've had this for 10 years. What I'm getting at, I guess, in that regard is like, that's also what makes it a challenge in terms of which direction did you choose?
I like to say, people, you can't buy experience, you just have to live it. And so when you bring, like, for founders like yourself, bringing in somebody that says, hey, look, here's my experience, this is what I've done. But I also think that and maybe this is connected. I'm going to try to tie a couple of things, because one of the things you said is we had a situation in Chicago and Toronto that actually didn't go well. But if I go back to a conversation that Roderick Jefferson had with me, he said, like, one of the things I think leaders do a terrible job of initially is coming in and be like, this is the way, versus like, all right, what's going on here? So I can use all of the things that I've learned to craft the right system for the company at the right time.
Yeah.
Is there any correlation that you can think back to say, we brought really great, and I don't mean, I love Salesforce, I work there, I'm a big fan of them, right? Like they've got great people, they teach you so much there.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have great people that come in, you go, okay, this is the system that I've created or I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And it might be the right system, but it's just not the right time for you. I don't know if you saw any correlation of the system that was trying to be brought in at that time maybe didn't fit where you are, and you were trying to go too big, too fast, too slow, too quick. I don't know if there's anything around the systems that help you to go, okay, this is the thing.
I mean, there probably was, but like I said, it was a challenging period for the company unrelated to that. That, as I said, sort of caused that disruption. So I think if we had played that out, it would have been very successful. I think a lot of things that we would have done would have been really successful. We're in a unique stage or point, I suppose you could say, where it's been 10 years since the sort of the vision of the company, was announced, and now it's only finally being realized. And some of that relates to what you're describing. So as in 10 years ago, maybe not 10, but 8 years ago, I definitely wanted us to move away from being 100% direct sale to also having product-led or self-service from that standpoint. It actually launches next week for us. And, that's not so much the point as it is. Those would have been the core areas of focus that we just had to maintain. Or And frankly, that's probably a good way of looking at it. It's like you just have to be able to maintain it. So as in, if you're going down the BDR, SDR, XDR, whatever it is these days route, just using that as an example, I think where everything goes sideways is when you may have to, backslide, or you may have to take a step back, and that can mean like, exiting members of the team, right? Which we certainly see a lot of. And any kind of tumultuous events really is what causes the disruption. So I guess going back to your question, it's not so much that there was anything that stuck out for us as it was, if I could have gone back, it would be like, okay, we want to hire 5 people for something, whether it's AEs or SDRs or something like that. Just hire 2, because we know that if we hire 2, we won't run into a problem, right? And this becomes that conflict, right, that everybody runs into from a growth perspective, right? Everybody wants to grow faster, so it's like, let's just throw some money at it, but that money goes nowhere if the consistency isn't maintained. And I would say that actually, of most companies that I've ever seen out there, despite the challenges or failures that we've had, we've been better at that because we've had to really manage the financial health of the business, again, from a bootstrap perspective. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what comes to mind when I hear that.
Yeah, there's evolutions where I use the word fail, but it's the first attempt in learning, right? Like it is a failure, but you know what? We learned a lot. The other thing that I've had to learn in my career, and actually Dan Wardle is somebody who was on the podcast when we talked about, he's an AI legal tech, and he talked about the growth, right? We want to grow fast, we want to grow sustainably. Now with the world of AI, you're trying to not throw people at the problem, you're trying to grow it sustainably.
Yeah.
And for me, what I've learned across is when you hire for a role, like you said, is I would hire 3 at one time to see what happens, because you're going to have somebody great, you're going to have somebody that's good, and you're going to have somebody, you know what, maybe not the right fit for them, but you effectively have these A/B tests. And so that way you're still covered for growth in the future, versus like we hired 2 and maybe both of them didn't work out. And you're like, oh, we just lost this amount of time. And as a bootstrap company, that's directly impacting, like, we can't mess around with cash like we can if we're a PE firm of just like throw money at the solution and just go super fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, we're seeing now how that's playing out as well, not so successful way. It's a different conversation.
So there's a question that you said, and I'd like to come back to it because you talked about your ceiling, and I think that there's a lesson to be shared here around founders. So you said, hey, look, I know what my ceiling is. When you think about your ceiling of like your skill set of taking on, because you can't run the entire revenue engine forever, you get burnt out, and you can't take it all because then everything is bottlenecked through you. What are the signs for you that says, hey, you know what, I'm now ready to hire a marketing leader, a sales leader, a revenue operations leader? Like, for you, what were the signs that populated to go, look, it's now time for me to hire that person?
The senior level one, though, or a mid-level one, or both?
It could be either. And maybe the question to you is like, which did you hire first? Did you hire a manager, director, or did you go right to VP?
No, we hired more junior people, but then, to be honest, I mean, it was a different time too, so you have a lot more energy. Like I was 32 10 years ago, so I had a lot more energy than I do now, for sure. Meaning, like, to be able to manage all of these, like that sort of spider web or octopus of areas. And let me think on that actually for a second. I think the thing is like, this is why I said earlier, like, it's people first and system second. Right. And again, it was a similar, I'm just remembering 10 years ago, it was a similar challenge back then where we had people who had worked at, good companies or had like a decent level of experience, but maybe they lacked in like creativity when they were in that sort of mid-range, or maybe they lacked a, higher volume level of experience. So meaning like they came from a company that maybe was in enterprise. So it's like they were closing like just a few deals a quarter, something like that. Again, this is like, I'm thinking of 10 years ago. And so where things like didn't work is like we were, again, like ramping up on that volume side of things, using that example. So I don't know which would have been more successful. And frankly, as I noted, like we haven't been that successful up until recently from a people perspective. Actually, sorry, I don't think I did say that. So it's hard for me to reference what we did because it wasn't successful, but I don't think it's unsuccessful because of necessarily the strategy. I think it was unsuccessful, maybe just it turned out to not be the right person in those early stages, as we were discussing. You just end up spending a lot of time, and it ends up kind of being added to the list of failures when things don't work out, and then you're sort of like, or not sort of, then you're restarting from scratch. And that, I think, is, like I said, on the revenue side or sales side as well. It's like that is ultimately like the worst thing that you can do.
Yes, and you start from a different level. Now okay, that didn't work, but this is what I need. And when you've decided to make, if we just take it to the more senior level, like the VP level, when you make that change, do you look at it and go, all right, my core skill set is in, I'm just going to, for sake of, I'm really strong on the sales side. I'm not strong in product. I've got somebody in product, but you know what? I can handle the product or the sales side for a little bit longer. I really need to have somebody in marketing, because that's where I feel like I'm drowning. Like, how do you think about that? Of like, look, this is now the role because of fill in the blank.
You mean fill in the blank in terms of like, which one do I need over the others?
Yeah, for you, like fill in the blank.
It would align directly with what you said. As in, like, I'm not getting into like scaling the actual product organization or the financial organization or so on. So I would say that makes the most sense.
Now, is it hard? Did you find it hard to give up, quote unquote, give up that area and go like, look, because you said trust earlier. I'm going to give you the trust.
That's where the problem. I mean, out of the gate, I trust people right away until they give me a reason not to.
And because it's hard, right? Like, you come in, and especially the transition. For me, my opinion is, if you're founder-led sales and you bring somebody in, well, I did it this way. Why can't we do it this way? Well, here's how the things go, but I know this worked. Like, there's a push and a pull that has to happen, and there maybe a healthy dynamic that has to happen of, like, as the founder, did you have to go, look, I'm open-minded, but I know that this works and I really like this, but you've got a different level of experience. Is that hard?
That wasn't that difficult. Sorry, that portion that you're talking about, like that initial layer of trust, like that wasn't difficult. It's when, typically the issues come when like things are just not making sense. Again, this is the difference between, funded and bootstrap, where it's like the bandwidth that you're willing to provide is a lot less. I mean, using another sort of example, it's like, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about companies who spent like hundreds of millions on marketing, and then they're like, we built a $50 million company. Well, of course you did. You spent like 300 million on marketing campaigns. Like, it would be hard not to do that in that stage. So where that got me thinking was just, again, on the other side of that coin, when you're in the bootstrap scenario, it's like, you just can't give people as much time. And if things don't sound to be lining up, it's not about necessarily how you did it. It's like, if you just can't reconcile what's being presented or what's being actioned, and effectively the results don't come quick enough, that becomes a big, a challenging factor. Because again, you're running the risk of, well, do we let this play out even longer and it doesn't work, or it does work, but we are not seeing, the path to that being, that strategy or that process or that project or whatever it is, being successful. So it's a difficult question to answer, because it's all predicated on again, but it comes back to that trust component. And like I said, we've had a lot of challenges in that area of the people side of things. I think most people have had the same. It's hard. Just hard.
And as you're talking, my immediate thing was, oh, bootstrap founders don't have much patience, really?
Yeah, that's probably
I'm kidding, but it's because you're so involved and you see the direct outcome, right? Like, it's like, I'm going to do this thing and I see an outcome. Yes or no? Okay. If so, do more. If not, turn it off. Like, there's that test and iterate from, even the lean startup, and that validated learning of like, I'm going to do a thing. Did it work? Yes or no? And if it didn't, like, you're doing constant, feedback loops to be able to know, did this work or not? Right. And so I think there's the hiring that next level, the giving the trust, giving the focus. It should do one of two things. One, level you up, because like you said, the ceiling, and it takes, now you go, oh, okay, well, I see in a different way.
Yeah.
And the other thing, it should take something off your plate. Should,
yeah.
But there's sometimes, like, you hire somebody, and maybe they put more on your plate initially, because you've got to transition all the stuff that you've learned, in order for you to level up, and then they're trying to give you the information, but the time is the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in those bootstrapped just my comment or my opinion. Okay, so before we run out of time, what do you find are, if you were to maybe go back, could you kind of look to, here's some common mistakes that somebody or that my network or people, bootstrap founders that I know have made before hiring those VP levels? Is there anything that comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is like I can only speak for myself again, but my maturity around hiring, or sorry, a founder's maturity around hiring. And I see this elsewhere as well. I'm actually going to make a phone call after this to a friend of mine who's a bootstrap founder as well. I don't speak to him enough, but that, like, I suppose like the level of expectation that you have of the individual coming in and how you're presenting that expectation. So what I mean by that is early on, I think I was selling the opportunity or the company more than I was allowing people to not sell themselves, but sell themselves on why they're suitable to the role, and actually focusing more on the fact that I should be convincing them why they shouldn't work here. Like, excuse my language, but like, it's really fucking hard in a bootstrap startup. And I've noticed a significant difference in taking that approach and frankly saying what I just said. With hires that have come in a really short amount of time. I don't even want to share it because it's so recent. I think that if I had started doing that 10 years ago, we would be in a vastly different space, because we're in that stage as an industry where you were like, at the companies we were respectively at, were really just trying to grow at all costs. So if somebody was telling us that, hey, yeah, I built this revenue engine, I built that team, and we accomplished this, and so on and so forth, that's all great, but like, everybody was saying that, right? And that's just where the industry has gone. And obviously we're seeing this, concentration. We can get back into that at, maybe another call for another time, or discussion for another time. But I would spend a lot more time honing your hiring skills and focusing on your values, and then allowing those values to dictate the hiring process of those individuals, because those hires will dictate the success of the business if you're looking to go, again, as you said, from that startup to scale mentality.
Is it too much for me to ask, what did you change from that? Because I like what you said, the hiring system and values. When you made that,
I literally just went in. I go into calls now and I'm like, if you're not customer obsessed, don't take the job. If you don't have extreme urgency, don't take the job. If you don't have a strong attention to detail, don't take the job. Obviously, I'm feeding that into other parts of the conversation, but it's honestly, I'm not sugarcoating it. And I think that's the change. And as soon as you start speaking that, like, in whatever way that applies to whatever the values are of business XYZ, or the hires that arguably like end up at the table at the end of it are far more suitable than they would be if you didn't.
So it sounds like you changed your questions versus your process, or like the system.
It's not just questions. It's more just like, I guess, approach comes to mind. It's just your approach of measuring, applicants to the interview process. I don't even like using the word interview, but like the meeting process with these individuals. Because again, if I'm here just, Maropost is amazing, things are great, we're growing this, we're launching that, everything's magical, that doesn't really put them into a position, nor does it give me any sort of understanding of what our true expectations are of this individual, or what the business's expectations are. And so then they start, and I see this happening everywhere else, whether people say they do it or not. Then that person starts, and then it's like, okay, where's the revenue, right? You just using that as an example. Where's the revenue? What's happening with these marketing campaigns? What's happening with the team? How's everybody performing? What's the week over week? And that person's like, I wasn't expecting this shit at all. If they had told me up front that like it was such an extreme level of drive that was needed, right, I might have operated differently. And again, you can go to Salesforce or Shopify or whoever of the larger organizations, even HubSpot, and you can fit right within that mold, and then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But that's not 99.9% of the companies, and certainly not anybody who's probably listening here today.
I really like how you said that, of being, I don't want to say it's a transparency of the situation, because if you hire somebody on that notion, like you're saying, like they come in, if you're like, this is so great, we're crushing it, and then they come in, they're like, I thought you said you had a huge lead flow. Yeah, we did, but that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like that expectation and reality, that it can come in really hard at the same time. And then your expectation of them is rooted in a different reality. And then their reality of like, but you told me this.
Right. They're already on the back foot. Like, I did not expect this pace.
Yeah. And then it's either, look, I'm not the right person, Ross. I can't, like you, I thought this was the world, but that's not, I got to leave. And now you got to restart over again. Or you go, oh, crap. I brought that person in who's at the 150 plus mark for the 30 mark, and I missed because I should have done this, right? Like it happens on either side. Anyways, I know we're going to run out of time, but this has been fun. I think I could talk. Maybe there probably is another topic in here. So if you're open to, but not to put you on the spot, but as I like to say, to wrap up, everybody likes new, nobody likes different. And when you do both at the same time, it can either cause friction or uncertainty. We've talked a lot about that today. For somebody thinking about leveling up their hiring process or bringing in those next leaders and transitioning some of the skill set from a CEO to that leadership team, what are 2 or 3 actionable things that you could say, hey, look at these things or do these things before you start to put that hiring out there or that hiring post out there? What would you tell them?
Number one would be what we just talked about. I mean, I can rehash that. But number one would be defining your values as a founder. Or frankly, even maybe the value, ensuring that the organization has values that are true. So if I'm a VP of sales and, I'm going to my founder and saying, hey, like, what are our values here? Like, what do you want me to hire based on? That would be the number one component that I would reference. Outside of that, I mean, then it comes down to, I think, what's always a good question is how asking people, if you're referring to on the hiring side or for going out for that individual, asking them how they measure. If somebody talks about annual, get the fuck out of there. But that is a short track to failure in general, because again, we are not Salesforce, we are not HubSpot, we are not these insanely well-oiled machines, almost living organisms from a company perspective that are just driving revenue or building revenue, in many ways on their own. So having that clarity is, to me, that's the second most important, I would say. What would third be? Sorry, clarity around their views of how to measure, success. If somebody shows up and they're like, I measure my team weekly, I'm looking for paperwork to get this person hired, provided everything else makes sense. But that's a strong sign, because they know that this is a week over week game. Like, that's how you can say month over month. Of course, like, we're typically looking at monthly quotas, but if you are a VP of sales, you are, working with the executive team, you probably have some semblance of a board or an advisory board. They want to see success week over week. They don't want to wait for week 4 of the month and find out like, oh, the numbers were way off in week 1 and we just didn't do anything different about it. And so now we're starting on, starting on the back foot. So I think that's a really important aspect. Is that what you're asking about?
That's exactly it. Like, how do we recap? And there's a great topic that we probably should have talked about even from
monthly versus annual versus quarterly. Weekly versus monthly versus quarterly versus annual.
Similar to Maropost version 1, 2, 3. I think there's a Carl and Ross version 2 conversation that needs to happen on this.
Version 2, we were annual as an example. And look, that did not turn out well. So
awesome. Where I know we have to wrap up, get you out of here. Where, if people want to learn more about you, where do they find you?
LinkedIn, number one, most likely, and then simply maropost.com, I think is always helpful.
Awesome. This was a lot of fun, Ross. We've never spoken before. We've been connected on LinkedIn. I'm not even sure how, but learning more about the journey of Maropost and what you guys are doing, it's really cool. So if you're in that e-commerce space, like, check them out. They're doing some cool things. And obviously Ross is, again, we've never met, but it seems like a pretty great guy, and he's going to be obsessed about solving your problems. So you're probably in a good spot if you're thinking about it. So thanks for doing this today.
Yeah.
That's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. Obviously, want to thank you, Ross, for sharing these invaluable insights today. There's some strategies he just shared on, you can put them into action. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Till next time, it's Carl, the Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn your obstacles into opportunities. Thank you for investing your time with us today. See you in the next episode.